Hello, friends. My name is Josh. Welcome back to the Life Reset Collective. Today, we are talking about what nobody tells you about emotional healing. And I've got 4 points that I want to share with you today. Emotional healing is not as easy as it sounds. And I have some personal anecdotes here. I've got some actual lived experience that has taught me about this. And I've learned to see some things coming that might be able to help you as you navigate your life reset. Now, I just want to quickly go over the purpose of this channel. The Life Reset Collective exists to support individuals rebuilding their lives after loss, trauma, burnout, or major life transition. Through soul-deep encouragement, sacred wisdom, and practical tools, we walk with you as you begin again with intention, self-compassion, and courage. We believe healing is non-linear. Everyone deserves a second chance, and your story isn't over. This is a new beginning. I was inspired to make this channel because I've gone through 2 major life resets, basically having to start over completely from scratch in my life, both times due to divorce. Divorce does not have to be your reason for having a life reset. There could be many, many reasons. Death in the family, loss of a job, loss of a place to live, illness diagnosis, legal problems. There could be all kinds of reasons that you may have to navigate starting all over again in life, basically from the beginning, and that's what this channel is for. So now let's get into the first point here, what nobody tells you about emotional healing. At first, there are more bad emotions than good. One of the unfortunate parts of the journey of trying to heal emotionally is that you're going to be inundated with a backlog of negative emotion, okay? Why do we even start out trying to heal emotionally? Well, because we're in pain, because you're suffering, because you've been through trauma, because you have the stuff in your mind, in your life, in your soul that's making you feel terrible, whether it be, guilt, or whether it be just self-loathing, or whether it be replaying awful things people have said to you or awful things you think about yourself, whether it be a general sense of negativity. The negative emotions are the things that hit the hardest, and we want to heal emotionally so that we don't have to live in suffering anymore. But what a lot of people don't tell you is that when you begin the process of trying to heal emotionally, you're going to get hit by so many bad emotions, and it's going to feel like this crushing weight at first, because it's almost like once you become aware of the fact that you want to heal emotionally, then I think the tendency is that we stop repressing all the negative feelings and we try to sort them out, organize them, get acquainted with them, and try to diagnose what's going on. And so you're going to have quite a bit of time where you're going to deal with a lot of negative emotion. Just be ready for that, because that doesn't mean that your healing journey isn't working. It just is the truth about how it usually begins, okay? Now, here's the second thing most people don't tell you about emotional healing. The longer you stayed in the bad places, the longer you stayed in the toxic relationship, the longer you stayed at that toxic job, the longer you were exposed to those people who treated you badly, the longer those bad emotions are going to stick with you after you begin your healing journey. So there's an element of how long was the exposure? And if you think of negative energy or bad experiences, like chronically bad experiences, like you were in a bad marriage, or you had a terrible family life, or you went to work every single day at a job where basically the job was like an abusive relationship all in itself, right? And you have these built up emotional basically damages. The longer you were exposed to all that negativity, all that destructiveness, the longer it's going to take to process it on the back end. So if you were in a 10-year toxic relationship, I hate to tell you this, and I know this might not sound like good news, but it might take you 5 years to really sort through all that, versus if you were working for 4 months at a really toxic job and then you quit. That's going to be a lot different. The 4 months of exposure is going to tend to take a different amount of time to work through than 10 years of exposure. And there's also a severity of exposure. If you endured 10, basically overall negative years in a toxic workplace, but it wasn't that toxic, that's going to be a lot different from 6 months in an actual hell where your job was at the maximum level of toxic. So there's a severity factor, but the idea is there is exposure time and exposure intensity. Those things are going to have a direct correlation on how long it's going to take you to work through the negative emotions and begin to heal from that experience. This is going to take us to point number 3. True emotional healing will require you to separate yourself from the exposure to those situations. And here's the part that a lot of people get hung up on is that, and I like to use this analogy, you could never discipline yourself good enough to bench press a house, okay? A lot of times when we're in hard circumstances, we tend to say to ourselves, if I can just get better enough, if I can learn to deal with it better enough, if I can learn to turn off my emotions better enough, if I can learn to stop engaging better enough, if I can stay more stoic, then I can, start to heal even with these things going on. But friend, trying to heal from a toxic situation that you're still in is a lot like saying to yourself, if I just keep lifting weights, eventually I'll be able to deadlift a whole house. It's like, no, there are limits to what we can do. And I'm going to tell you this, and this is not a very popular thing to say, but you're not going to be able to begin emotional healing while still being exposed to the toxicity you're trying to heal from. It's really important to separate yourself from it, to get out of it. It's sort of like, being in a radioactive zone and trying to treat yourself for radiation poisoning. It's like, okay, yeah, you can treat yourself, but every minute you're getting another huge dose of radiation. So, there comes a point where treatment isn't going to be very effective until you leave the scene of exposure and you get clear of that. Now, before we go to this last point, there's one more point, and this point ties into the last point really well. And this is unfortunately one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to heal. And I'm going to tell you that this has kept me from healing for years. I used to do this and I didn't understand this for the longest time. But before I get into it, I want you to download our free ebook, The Life Reset Framework, 9 Steps to Begin Again. This is a free ebook that details 9 steps that every single life reset is going to need in order to be successful. So these are 9 steps, and they're non-linear, so they do not go in order, but you will want to deploy all 9 of these steps to truly, successfully break free from your old life, climb out of the pit you fell into, and start your new life. Climb that mountain to get to the next chapter that you deserve. These 9 steps are going to be crucial. So it doesn't cost you anything. Links in the description. This is part of me trying to basically help everyone use the steps that have helped me as I have navigated my life reset. So I hope that helps you. I hope that you find some assistance in those steps and at least 1 or 2 pieces of information that might help you to move to the next chapter. With that being said, let's go on to our final point here. Point number 4. Most people actually don't remove themselves from toxic situations, believe it or not. Most people who need to heal, they actually hold on to the good in that situation, trying to keep it while also remaining in an exposure place for all the negative, all the toxicity. See, here's the tricky thing about situations is that there's always good and bad. Yeah, you might be in an abusive work situation, but they pay you really good money. You might be in a toxic marriage, but at least you have 2 incomes and you have someone that you can fall back on for help. There are always good points with the bad. And what we will do a lot of times when it comes to, and I'm talking strictly about emotional healing. I'm not talking about life strategy necessarily. I'm not talking about whether it's wise to go or stay in that situation, whatever. I'm talking strictly from the context of emotional healing. What we will often try to do is hold on to the good in that situation, stay in that situation so that we can continue to have the good thing. And then in doing so, we will remain exposed to the toxic parts, but we will try to tune them out or ignore them or just be better, do better so they don't affect us as much. But this muddles and confuses our journey and basically keeps us sick and this keeps us there. And in some ways, a slightly terrible situation can be harder to separate yourself from than a completely terrible situation. At least in a completely terrible situation, you have nothing to lose by leaving. But in a slightly terrible situation, you may have a lot to lose by leaving. And that can cause you, for logistical reasons, to say, well, I bet I may as well stay and tough it out. This job is horrible. It makes me feel horrible every day, but they pay me really well and I have these financial goals, so I'm going to tough it out. You might say that to yourself. However, here's the problem. If you're also saying to yourself, I want to emotionally heal, the truth is you're not going to be able to do it while working at that job. It's just the flat truth of the matter. And I'm not saying that to try to condemn you or to say that you're doing a bad thing. We do what we have to do. Sometimes we have to be in situations for a little while that don't feel very good because there are life necessities. You may have to stay at your job until you get a new one, or, it might make the most sense for you to keep living in that situation for the moment as you plan your life reset, whatever, right? Because sometimes a little bit of preparation for the journey can really make all the difference. But I want you to realize that if you find that you've been unable to emotionally heal while continuing to be exposed to all the toxicity, that's not so surprising. And the truth is that doesn't make you a weak person or a bad person or incapable. The truth is, trying to heal from a toxic situation when you're still exposed to it is going to be basically impossible. And that doesn't make you a bad person or a weak person. It's just a fact of life. And it's just like trying to bench press a house. We have limits to what we're physically capable of doing, emotionally capable of doing. And the truth is that the human body doesn't bend that way, right? You deserve separation, and then healing can take place. So just think about that. And, as you begin, as you continue, as you move to the next chapter of your life reset journey, just keep in mind that, emotional healing is so possible and you can do it. You can totally do it. It's just not going to happen while you're in that environment. And those are basically 4 things that I think nobody tells you about emotional healing. And I wanted you to hear them today. And I hope that they help. Thank you so much for coming back to another episode of the Life Reset Collective. My name is Josh. Please hit that subscribe button and come back whenever you need some life reset encouragement. I'll see you awesome people on the next one.